It is our pleasure to be joined by the unquestioned brains of the operation over at Soonerscoop.com. Josh McCuistion is in the house. What's going on, man?
Not much. I'm probably going to put that on a placard somewhere. We're going to make sure Eddie, Carrie, we'll make sure everybody sees that for sure.
No doubt. Now, before we kind of dive into individual guys, and obviously the Peyton Bowen situation is very interesting. What's this time of year like for you, man?
It's chaos, man. Because I mean, you guys know you got kids, so on top of all the work stuff with portal and recruiting, you got Christmas lights to see and all the other stuff you got to do, keep the missus happy, all that stuff. So man, it's just an insane. It's one of those things though too. It makes me like I can't imagine what a coach's life is like because I'm it's to quote the to Mike Leach, like the chicken or the pig. The chicken's involved, but the pig's committed, man. Like, I mean, I'm around it, but I mean, to have to live it day in and day out, that's a whole different animal.
Has the early signing period, it was supposed to make things easier on everyone, and I feel like it made it infinitely more difficult.
In a lot of ways, I think you're right. And I've always been a big early signing day guy. I was a believer. I thought it made sense, but I thought it made sense in like August, the guys that you knew, guys like you two, like you knew
guys that want to get it out of the way before their senior year.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but guys that, that want to go through it, hey, fine, no problem. They can go to February. It's because December to February, I mean, you're talking about basically 6 weeks. Like, it's not like that just took some huge pressure off your plate. And so, like I said, I'd like to see something in the preseason so the coaches can kind of know, okay, we've got these numbers. We know what we've got left. And then you run it out to February like we always have. And they can focus right now instead of worrying about, in homes with recruits, they're getting out in the portal. They're finding their numbers. They're doing whatever they need to do. And then in February, they can kind of fill out the ranks and have it go any way they want to. So I get how it's kind of come to this, but it feels like now that the portal's such a real thing, you're going to have to make some amendments to the, the kind of initial plan that the NCAA had.
Yeah, this is the system we got for now, boys. So we'll just everyone involved will just have to live with it. All right. Let's start with Peyton Bowen. This is a situation that all OU fans appear to be very interested in. Notre Dame fans appear to be rather worried. What's the latest you're hearing on this entire thing?
Sure. Well, I mean, the most recent thing is Oklahoma had their final in home on Saturday night, and that seems so straightforward. But there were rumors on Friday that he was going to take an official visit to Oregon over the weekend, and that obviously would close the chance. And you guys know because you went through it. That last in home, that's usually, especially for an uncommitted guy, that's when Brent Venables in this case is going to come in. But any head coach, they make that last pitch, that last thing. And all week, it had seemed really good for Oklahoma because you had Oregon coming in on Wednesday, Notre Dame went in Thursday, and then Oklahoma really kind of had an open-ended period. They could do it Friday, they could do it Saturday. It was really loose in how they could interpret that. And then all of a sudden, it was like he may go to visit Oregon this weekend, and that was just going to throw everything up in the air. But the fact that they got the last, that's usually a really good indicator of what a guy's doing, what he's thinking. Same with official visits. You get the last one. That's usually that's a good tell in some ways. It's not exact by any stretch, but I think in the end, it's come down to Peyton really wants to be at Oklahoma. That's my impression from everybody I've spoken to. That's where he's most comfortable. Obviously, he's good friends with Jackson Arnold, who I know you guys had on not long ago. There is the girlfriend. That's always a great chip to have in your favor. So there's a lot of connection there. I think in the end, it's come down to his mother is very in favor of Notre Dame. And, we all get it. Academics, all the things that moms care about and really harp on, that Marcus Freeman's really hit a home run with her. But I think as it's progressed, it's kind of become maybe she still wants Notre Dame, but she's comfortable enough with Oklahoma and feels good enough about that staff that she can kind of sign off on that. And that's what I think is going to happen Wednesday. But there does become a point where, what are we all waiting on here? Like if it's as straightforward as it seems to me, it feels like it maybe should have already been done.
Yeah, it feels like it if it was straightforward, it should have already been done a long time ago, like way back in the summer. Is it at least around here, it hasn't felt like Notre Dame was like the true player for very long. It felt like the Oklahoma was inevitable, but Oregon comes in, and I think we know why Oregon has such a place at the table here. It's NIL stuff, right? So you got the Notre Dame connection with Marcus Freeman and, the mother, the academics. Got Oklahoma for all of the reasons that you mentioned. Teammates want to come here, distance, it's easy drive up for parents to come to games. And then you've got the money situation at Oregon. Is it just as simple as how do you weigh those three against each other?
I think that's some of it. And what's interesting is kind of depending on who you talk to, there are several pieces in play within his family. I think there's some, well, okay, this, like maybe mom likes Notre Dame, dad feels differently. And then it feels like Oklahoma could be the safe middle, because I think that could be, because that's, again, Peyton, I think he's going to get to make his choice. There's certainly some kids I cover when dad is so over the top, or mom, or whoever it may be, you're like, it doesn't matter. He's going to go wherever dad tells him to, or wherever mom tells him to, or whatever whoever the family, kind of leader is. I think Peyton gets to make this choice, and that's why I think it'll come out for Oklahoma. But it does feel like there is some kind of pushing and pulling. And I think that's maybe why it has seemed so chaotic at times, where, like you said, Teddy, where it seemed, there's been multiple times when it seemed like, okay, this is the weekend. He came in for Bedlam and everything went so well that weekend. And you kind of thought, okay, here we go. This is going to be the time it all pops. And then it just doesn't. And you just kind of wonder about that. And again, because it would be one thing if Oklahoma was the uncomfortable choice, or, something where he's doing, something that's going to upset a lot of people. Most of the people around him that are, like I said, girlfriend, good buddy Jackson Arnold, all these people are going to be so enthusiastic about it, but it's just gotta, at some point, the rubber has to meet the road. And now, as we sit here and talk, I mean, we're 72 hours away from kind of that moment.
So that seems like the top decision that a lot of people are waiting to see on Wednesday. Josh, are there any other big time prospects that OU's in play for that are going to make decisions on Wednesday?
Well, the ones that we don't know, Peyton's, and I want to give him some credit. A lot of guys that are in his scenario, they don't talk much. They won't deal with anybody. Like, they don't really let you know what's going on. They kind of shut down. He's not been that way. And from a guy in my position, you kind of have to shout those guys out, because, rubbing, just trying to find any little dirt you can find anywhere is sometimes brutal on these guys that just don't want to communicate. The other guy that I think most people will be watching is Tassili Akana, the big linebacker from Utah. Really interesting guy. He's kind of one of those guys. I've said it before. It's kind of like when you talk about, I said the same thing about Dasan McCullough. It's really about how creative your defensive, coordinator, however you want to term that, sculptor, the guy that's actually doing the design, how creative can he be? I think Tassili Akana can be very good under a creative mind, because he has a unique skill set. He's a guy that can put his hand down in the dirt. He could stand up. You could drop him off sometimes. He brings a lot of different stuff. And, I know most people know it at this point, but he was one of Brent Venable's early targets. He made him a focus, and really was a guy that I can't think of many guys in this class that Brent was such a spearhead for. And I mean, Brent's very involved. I don't want to make it sound like that, but was almost a leader in his recruitment, kind of from beginning to end. And I think Oklahoma's going to close that, but Texas is apparently making it kind of interesting down the stretch here. I know they've got some confidence. I've heard some talk of Utah as well. It's going to be an interesting race. Now, I know people will hear Utah and think, well, he's a Utah kid. He's actually from Hawaii, moved over during COVID, had to deal with, Hawaii wasn't going to play football. Utah was about as close as he could get to home that was playing football in 2020. So he went over there, and rather than move back to the island after it was done, he just stayed in Utah and played out his high school career. So he's kind of an interesting guy, because he doesn't really have any true allegiance anywhere other than, I guess you can argue, his sister plays volleyball at Texas. So if we want to argue the Peyton Bowen connections, we have to give, some credit to that as well. But I think he's going to be interesting. And then a guy they had in this weekend is Marcus Strong, a big defensive lineman from Florida. Kind of one of those guys in Florida you see a lot where, 6'5", 260. And it's crazy that you can see a lot of guys like that in Florida, but that's just Florida just raises monsters. But he is really athletic, really long guy. And I think assuming everything went to plan this week, and I haven't had a chance to talk with Marcus yet, I would be very surprised if OU's not the choice for him.
A couple of things here. DJ Hicks, I know there was talk for a while that maybe he was going to kind of be back in the fray a little bit after that commitment to Texas A&M. I don't know what all's gone on there. And Stone, is he going to reclassify? Have you heard anything about that?
There has been some talk of that. I honestly expect what David is going to do is announce he's probably just coming back to Oklahoma, and we'll try to do it at semester next year and just be a midterm guy. He's kind of like a situation we were talking about with Bowen earlier. Like, I know he never really wanted to go to IMG. That was never really his thing. I think his mom wanted him to go out there, see what that was like, see if he took to it. And as much as he's gained from IMG, he's played some great competition, played a bunch of elite guys. I think he'd like to come back home. I've heard he's always wanted to come back to Del City, but I've heard all sorts of schools in the area saying, he may come back and play for us. So he'll be an interesting guy to watch. It's possible, Teddy. But my guess is he's going to announce he's coming back. That's kind of the rumor I've heard. As far as Hicks, Oklahoma made that really interesting. Kind of the same deal with Peyton Bowen, where it just seemed like it got to a tipping point where either you're going to do it now or you're never going to do it. And it just, and I know Brent went in home last week and really, Oklahoma did everything they could. I just don't think, I think A&M, had a lot of things in their favor, not unlike kind of what you were referencing with Oregon and some of their abilities earlier. But at the same time, it's much closer to home. His dad is now the head coach at the high school there, Cade Pettaway. Going to be harder for him to get up and, get to Oklahoma or get to Oregon that Hicks is looking at as well and go see his kid play. So A&M provides some convenience as well. It's not all, I know people want to make it all about one thing or another. There's multiple layers to it for David Hicks, but I think in the end, he's probably going to pick A&M. And honestly, if I was to say, I would guess Oregon's probably the runner-up for him at this point.
Looking at the class as a whole, Josh, you've got 2 5-stars, right? With Jackson Arnold and PJ Adebawore. When it comes to those two guys kind of being the pillars of this class, like how special do you think those two guys can be, right? One quarterback, one pass rusher, exactly what you're looking for in 5-star prospects.
Yep. Exactly. If you were going to pick your 2 positions offensively and defensively where we're going to get an elite talent, I think that's exactly where you start in this day and age. I know not that long ago you'd argued for defensive tackle, but and as a guy that got to see PJ in person this year, that is, that's just an outstanding evaluation, because back when OU offered him, he was like a 3-star guy, had some good offers, but really wasn't that well known. And then as people started going by North Kansas City and seeing him, guys, he's every bit of 6'4.5", 6'5", long arm, long legged. He hasn't even started to fill out his frame yet, but just an absolute freak of an athlete. He's the guy you're looking for coming off the edge. I think with him, and again, obviously Jackson Arnold, everybody's so familiar with Jackson, all he's done at Denton Guyer. I think what's amazing to me is you look at this, and after, we're a year in now. I remember doing this with you guys a year ago, and it was all the kind of uncertainty. Oklahoma's probably going to bring in their best defensive class in 15 years, and they still got the 5-star quarterback. So, all that, we'll see how the quarterback situation goes. They got their guy. People can, when Jackson Arnold committed, there was a lot of, is this guy good enough for OU? And, there was a lot of talk, they should have taken the Jaden Rashada kid that was very high on Jeff Lebby. Really liked him a lot as well. And OU, they wanted to take Arnold, and they took him, and all they did is just watch it get paid off because he's just been outstanding ever since. Won the Elite 11, took Denton Guyer to state semifinals. And really, I know people kind of look at that and say, oh, he didn't get to finals this year. DeSoto's really, really good. I mean, you're talking about just D1 athletes. And I was talking about this the other day. You look at, okay, they have Peyton Bowen, they have Jackson Arnold. Great. That's an amazing. On that field, they have the 2 best players. Then the next 12 best players may be from DeSoto. So like people have to gauge that a little bit and understand that it's a depth situation that changes the story a little bit.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. I agree. Whenever he first committed to Oklahoma, it was like, okay, good player. Let's see what happens. Then because he wasn't a 5-star at that point, right? And then
that's correct.
Got his 5th star later on. And then the season he had with everyone, especially that game on ESPN, who was that against Allen?
Allen, yeah.
It felt like his stock had really just gone through the roof. And then I saw they reclassified, or I guess regraded, whatever you call it, here within like the last week or 10 days, and he came down. How do you know how that happened? Like what went on there?
Well, what I'm guessing you're talking about is a composite grade, and that's like something like, obviously I work for Rivals, but I realize all the other networks do different stuff. 24/7 will do what's called a composite. It's just like an average of all the rankings, and then it averages out everybody else. So it's hard to explain because not every ranking is a balance. It's not like, okay, they're 100th at Rivals and they're 24/7, they're 50, and another place. So it just comes out to the average of the 3. It's where do you rank in all 3, and then that rank becomes the ranking. It's not like an average score. So that became, God, as the guy who worked for the network that was the last to get Jackson Arnold to 5 stars, that was not a fun conversation to have over and over again. I was like, guys, I know where you think he is. I probably agree with you, but that's just not the way this works. And so after the Elite 11, it was like white flag. I don't care. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Like it'll happen when it happens. But with Jackson, again, I think it was a deal where Guyer's been so successful that it's kind of easy sometimes to pan those guys off. It's like, oh, he's just great because all that's around him or whatever that may be. I remember watching his tape because I didn't know him because, Lincoln Riley had obviously had Malachi Nelson, and I'd been to Southern California several times to see Malachi. I knew him really well. I knew the family. I didn't know Jackson Arnold from anything. Like I just had seen him play a few high school games, but he was not on my radar. And so it just became a situation where I'm trying to play catch up, and I'm watching this kid, and I'm like, I don't know why I think he was like 125 at the time he committed to OU, which is a great ranking. People lose sight of that. Like, I mean, that's a guy you expect to have an NFL career. I mean, and I think people kind of forget that. But at the same time, it's nowhere commensurate with what he's done. I mean, like, he had a great career, incredible athlete. And I think this year people finally realized how skilled he is with his feet, like all the plays he can make on the run and even within the offense. It's not just, play breaks down and he's going to do something. He can, you can design things for him that he will be very successful with. So again, I think it's Jeff Lebby making a really tough call because, as I said, I think he could have had Jaden Rashada, and he made the call for Jackson Arnold. And you look at all the rankings now, Jackson Arnold's ahead of Rashada, I think, unanimously across the country, and that was not the case at the time. I think he took some heat for it.
Josh, over the years, you and we have gotten the habit of getting into discussions about Oklahoma's necessity to get better at the line of scrimmage. That is I would say that is a frequent theme in our discussions. When you look at, let's start with the offensive line. When you look at the offensive linemen in this 2023 recruiting class, like overall, do you think Bill Bedenbaugh and Brent Venables, are they bringing in the type of guys that will get this program where they need to be up front, especially with the SEC looming?
Well, Gabe, we had to have this conversation because Caden Green was a frequent topic of conversation for you and I a couple years ago with some of that camp stuff. But, Caden, you talk about a guy with the physical tools to do anything he wants to do. Caden's he's a truly gifted player. He, coming from Missouri, I wondered at the time of his commitment, or I guess at the time that it seemed like OU was going to be a real option for him, how long it might take him, because I thought he had a lot of physical development to go under, which is perfectly normal for an offensive lineman. But he was a little heavy, carried some bad weight, and I didn't know how hard he'd ever really hit it in the weight room. Over the last year, he's really transformed his body. He looks much better, cut off a lot of that bad weight. Now, he still needs to get stronger and all those things. I mean, I think you guys know better than me. If he needs to play next year, that's a problem. Like, you don't want to be in that situation. So I think he can be fine. Like I said, I think he can be special. I think he needs time to get there. You don't want to run him out there too early, mess with his confidence. Like, just let him grow naturally through it. One of the guys that's super interesting is Logan Howland, big guy, played tight end as a junior in high school. Nobody really was identifying him. And I think it's finally his high school coach sat him down and was like, look, man, you can be a 6'7", 270-pound tight end playing for Hofstra if you want to, or you can maybe think about moving to tackle. And I think within weeks he got his first FBS offer, and it just took off. I mean, you look at his offer list: Iowa, Miami. I mean, Mario Cristobal, say what you want about Miami. Mario Cristobal knows what he's looking at. And obviously Oklahoma as well. Those were really his three finalists. If you tell me that for an offensive lineman, I mean, Gabe, again, you know better than me. That's a really good stamp of approval on a guy. So I like what he brings, but very raw. I mean, people have to understand he's going to need time. This is something we saw, and Gabe, obviously with you being a good example, but so many guys that were high school tight ends going all the way back to like Frank Romero in the early 2000s, a lot of those kind of guys. And it's something OU's had success with, not something they've done as much as of late, but I'm really interested to see where it goes. And then Joshua Bates, Bill Bedenbaugh could offer about any center in the country, and he identified Joshua Bates very early on, made him a focus. And, in a state that Oklahoma doesn't really recruit much anymore, in Colorado, really, again, just kind of showered him with attention, made it known, you're my guy, you're the one I want. Josh commits, is the one guy that stands out from the previous staff as far as stuck with it the whole time, never deviated. And, now is about ready to enroll, graduated this weekend. So he is a big, sturdy guy, really, kind of a big, powerful center. Going to be interesting to see how they use him, if it's at all different, where I think we've gotten so used to Oklahoma. I mean, and I don't want to present him as not athletic, but he's more of a big bodied guy than I think we've seen sometimes at center. So that'll be kind of interesting to watch how that plays. And then Heath Ozaeta, kid, from Washington, really wasn't well known. Within like 2 weeks of being offered, he was a guy that most guys like me just hadn't heard any connection with Oklahoma about. But another guy, Stanford was involved with him, had some good, you look at it, and I had actually had a chance to go see him this season. And there's a lot of work there to be done. He's got to get bigger. He's got to get stronger, but he's got a nice frame. He's got good feet. It's just one of those things where if he'll buy in and work over an amount of years, I don't see any way there's no reason he shouldn't be able to be a starter in the near future. So this group can make them better. I think Howland and Green are clearly the upside guys where they can take it the farthest. And obviously with those guys having the length and size to play tackle, that's not a bad problem to have if that's where your real talent is.
Yeah. And just kind of building on that line of scrimmage theme, how about the defensive line group? It seems like there's more length there, and like height and size and real, I guess, maybe versatility than we've seen perhaps. But how does the defensive line group that we have right now stack up to years past?
It's so funny because you bring that up and you're right. I mean, you look at the ends, with PJ Adebawore, who I've talked about, that I think is just probably, if I was going to bet on one guy in this class being a top 10 pick someday, he'd be my bet. Like, I think PJ Adebawore is special. Derrick LeBlanc, big, really interesting body type guy, real, so long-armed and long-legged and kind of short torso. Like, you don't see stuff like that very long, but still very big in the lower body. Going to be really interesting to see what Todd Bates does with him along the line, as far as kind of where they start him out at, what they see him, what kind of weight they see him putting on, because he's 265 pounds and looks skinny. I mean, like, he has a lot of room to grow in a lot of different directions. And then, Taylor Wein, the guy they took late from Tennessee, really blew up as a senior. And I talked to Taylor. I mean, at the time Oklahoma offered him, I think his best offer was like FCS. Like, he really didn't have anything big at that point in time. And then USC comes along. I mean, Kentucky came along. There was a lot of interest late in him. And I think, just talking to him, he just talked about, kind of getting into the weight room, putting some good weight on, really muscled up, and worked on his first step, just being more explosive. And, you look at all those guys, they're all 6'4", 6'5", long arm. And then you have Ashton Sanders at defensive tackle coming from Los Angeles, just a squat, real, powerfully built guy, going to come inside. Really great feet, though. I mean, he's a guy that you could see being a very skilled pass rusher on the inside. And again, it's just kind of what they do with them. And guys, and let's be honest, in years past, you'd wonder how that works. Can they be creative enough to find some ways to make all this work? Under Brent Venables, you're like, I don't think that's going to be the problem. Like, it's just getting these guys on the field, getting them experience and comfortable, and then he'll draw something up to get these guys loose and making plays up front. So I think this, again, like I said earlier, this defensive line is a big part of why I say I think this is the best class defensively OU signed probably since 2008. And you throw in Peyton Bowen, if you can add that little piece, you throw in Bowen, Akana, and the Marcus Strong kid that I was talking about earlier. That's another, kind of high ceiling guy. That's just monstrous. I mean, that can change your roster in a couple of years. And you go into the SEC, whether it's 24 or 25, you start looking more like an SEC roster. You've got those big nasties up front that can really do some things for you.
I'm interested in what you think about these wide receivers, right? I've heard a lot about Pettaway for a while now, and, not quite as much about Keyon Brown, but I think late in the season, it became rather obvious that, like, the OU's got to get more explosive at wide receiver.
Yep.
Are these guys potential, like, big time difference makers, you think?
Yeah, Pettaway, if you're talking about explosion, I mean, he's got Marvin Mims kind of ability to stretch. I mean, he really does. I go and see him, and he plays in, the Cypress ISD up in North Houston. And I won't pretend it's a great district. It's not, but there's plenty of good athletes in it. I mean, there's a lot of guys that can really run. And I go and see him this fall, and the first quarter just sleepy, man. He doesn't get much. There's nothing happening. All of a sudden they punt, or his defense forces a punt, gets the ball at the 11. First play, they just run a post pattern for him, and he goes 89 yards, just outruns everybody. I mean, it was kind of one of those things where, like, as soon as he caught the ball, you knew. I mean, there was nobody running with him. And that's what he's done his whole high school career. I mean, he's a Jeff Levy kind of guy. He wants to get vertical. OU fans should love him because basically he went to Austin and everybody thought he was going to go to Texas, came home, and all you heard was he's not going to Texas. He didn't like that visit at all. And so I'm like, OU fans are just going to love that dude. I mean, he came in right off. And even, with the Cale Gundy situation, and then obviously through some of the hiccups of this season, he was always like, what are you guys talking about? I'm fine. I'm solid. I'm going to OU. I'm going to help fix this. I want to be a big play guy. And he knows. I mean, he knows that opportunity's there for him because, like you guys said, by the end of the year, there were about, 3 receivers really getting heavy snaps. And then Theo Weiss kind of mixed in, who we all know is now gone. So, I mean, there's availability there to make plays. And I think he is tailor-made for it. Keyon Brown is – I don't know if a wide receiver can ever be your first off the bus guy, but he is that kind of dude, just a 6'2", 205. And I won't pretend I didn't know his name. I didn't know he was coming to OU's camp, and we watch that stuff pretty closely, but there's always a few that sneak in, and he shows up and you were just like, I don't know who that guy is, but I want to watch him do something. And immediately he just starts taking on some DBs, and we're talking guys that had offers from SEC schools, Pac-12 schools, good players, and he's just cooking them. I mean, just running past them, and he's, again, like I said, at 6'2", he's got great feet. Had a game early in the year where I think he had almost 300 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns. I mean, he is, and you're talking Florida, so doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing, you're playing athletes. And he is, I think, probably, and I know sometimes this term comes off bad, he's a very boomer bust guy. Like, I think he could be a guy that gets it immediately and all the, oh, you got a huge steal here. Or he's a guy that you wonder, like, maybe this is why they were able to get him out of Florida. I've dealt with Keyon. I've never gotten any reason for obvious concern, but it just shocks me. I mean, a kid from Tallahassee that they just went and took, and you're just kind of like, how does that happen? And had an offer from Alabama and picked Oklahoma. And kind of like I said with Pettaway, never seemed to waver, never seemed to be off about his decision. So like I said, I think the receiver room, while you would like probably one more, I'm sure the staff feels the same way. The two they got are absolutely capable of helping this team, and maybe as soon as next year.
One of the things that I think is really interesting, and sometimes it plays out like this often, but when I look at the class as a whole, some of my favorite guys, like the three lowest ranked guys in the entire class, Taylor Wein, Cade McIntyre, and Erik McCarty, I think may be some of the guys that end up being the best actual players out of the entire class. Do you see that the same? Like, I see that even though they're 3-star guys, I feel like there's a ton of value. Like even Picciotti as a 3-star guy. Like, I think some of these 3-stars we got are way undervalued right now.
I absolutely think there's some of that. Like, and I've heard you guys reference it a little bit. I'm going to be real interested to see if Joe John Finley can hang on to Cade McIntyre. Like, that's a big, long, athletic dude. Eddie, our guy Eddie, that obviously you both know well, went to Omaha to cover the baseball team, and we had him stop by and see Cade, and he was like, Eddie's interview, you're like, God, that kid's big. Like, you could tell, and it's one of those things. And also, just Eddie talking to him and talking to his family. I mean, he's an unbelievable kid. Like, he really is a guy. He's going to buy in from day one. I don't know if everybody saw the pictures of the in-home. Dad looks like he probably could use some eligibility. He could still play for him. He's a monster.
Dad knows where the weight room's at. I need Dad's supplement routine also. I need to know. I need some help. Whatever he's on, I want it.
Doesn't his family own a gym or something? Isn't that what his dad does?
I believe that's right. There's some real connection to it, and I can't remember what the entire storyline is, but it's absolutely something like that. As far as your question, though, the guy I really like that I kind of am shocked doesn't get more love is Kendall Dolby, the DB from NEO. I think that dude, it's kind of like, I don't know how he doesn't get on the field next year. You watch him play corner, safety. He's coming for somebody's job. Like, I mean, he's that kind of guy. Now he's a kid that gets it. I mean, he's not like he would never say the sentence I just said, but like, he is absolutely geared the right way. I like everything about him. I like his attitude. And just, again, you watch him, whether it's coming up and playing run, he's violent. He can drop off in coverage. He's very good with the ball in the air. You see those guys sometimes, you're like, well, he's got to be a corner because, if he's not engaged in the play, he'll kind of fade. But he could play safety if that's what they need him to do. I think he's very good with the ball in the air. He's natural. So there's a lot that I like there. I've just kind of been surprised he hasn't gotten a little more notoriety. I mentioned Ashton Sanders. I like him a lot. I think he's super active. You love those, especially in this day and age. And again, I hate to always go back to it, but you guys know better than I do. If you can get some pressure inside, just changes the game. I mean, it makes it so difficult to run what a lot of these offenses want to do. And Teddy, you mentioned Erik McCarty. Erik McCarty is one of my all-time painstaking situations. He is a guy, talked to the old staff and was checking with some people like, hey, do I need to go see him play in the state title game last year? Nah, I don't think he's going to be a fit. Like, he just wasn't seen as a target for them. And so I didn't go. Just thought, well, there's no reason for me to drive 7 hours from Houston to see a kid OU's not that serious about. Coaching change happens like a week later. Well, then I go to see Erik in the spring. He's injured in the spring, can't play. Was going to go see him twice this year. And I mean, McAllister, I don't want to make it sound like he's injury prone. McAllister rode that kid hard, and he just kind of kept getting ankles and knees, and he just kind of kept getting nicked up. And so I tried to see him 3 times this year, and every single time I did, he just wasn't good to go. And so he's probably the only Oklahoma high school guy that committed to OU that I haven't seen in person probably since your class, Teddy. Like, I mean, like it goes that, so like it goes back a ways, and it's just a shame that I'll probably never get rid of. But you watch the kid play. I mean, I don't care. It's kind of like, it's what you said. Like, if I'm going to bet on who's the best, the top 10 guy, I'll take PJ Adebawore. But if I had to say this guy is going to be a good football player and is going to make your team better, Erik McCarty, and I would also say Lewis Carter, the kid out of Tampa that they've got committed. Lewis Carter is a freaking football player. That's a monster.
Yep.
So I love both those guys. I don't know how you get them both on the field because they're kind of uniquely skilled, or they're kind of similarly skilled, but that's a good problem to have. I mean, if you're subbing those guys in and out and they're rotating, fine. But they are I saw Lewis in a high school game. I got to go watch him play. He had like 6 touchdowns, had a forced fumble, like 13 tackles. Like, I mean, and that was basically in 3 quarters of play because they just ran out the clock in the 4th. I mean, he just murdered people. It was impressive.
Josh, I'm always rooting for the Oklahoma guys to do well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I see the kid from Mustang, like that looks like an athlete, man. Where do you think Jacoby Johnson's going to play? Like, have you heard anything?
He's kind of like what I was talking about, like where I think his skill set is probably best at safety. You look at the frame, you look at the size. I think he's better at corner, though. Like, I think he looks better when I'm trailing a man, I'm on somebody's inside hip. I think at safety, sometimes he float, and you don't see him in that lot, but when they drop him off in zone at Mustang, he looked like he'd get lost a little bit. And I don't know if that's just he needs a challenge, facing – because, I mean, Jacoby Johnson's a freak of an athlete. I mean, he's one of those guys where as a high school player, there's plenty of guys in his class that are probably – especially at the position they will play. Jacoby's a great receiver right now, puts up huge numbers for Mustang. I don't mean to put that down at all. He is a especially gifted guy. As a DB, nobody challenges him. Nobody goes to his side of the field. And I get it. I wouldn't either if I was an offensive coordinator. But he's got so much that you just don't know. Like, maybe he's great at these things, but you don't get to see it very often because everybody's known who he was since he was a sophomore because OU offered him coming out of his freshman year. So he kind of had a target on his back at such an early age. And then, as a junior, really took off as a receiver, and everybody was like, oh, he really is a great athlete. But Gabe, you're not wrong. I mean, and this isn't one of those guys where he's going to shrink once he gets on OU's roster. He is 6'2". He's 200 pounds. He can run for days. He's a great basketball player as well. So, he's got feet and he can move and he can mirror and do some of those things. So it's going to be, to me, I've said it all along with Jacoby. If he wants to be great, Jacoby can be special. I mean, like, he has that kind of skill set, that ability. It's just a matter of, and I've heard, I am a Oklahoma Breakdown listener, so, I'll own that completely. But I've heard you guys talk about it. The difference between being a basketball guy and a football guy, it's different. It's not the same thing. It's not the same mentality. And I think at times Jacoby has a little bit of a basketball mentality. And if he can shake that and be a football guy and we're going to stick our nose in and do the things we got to do to be good, he can be great. I mean, he can be an NFL guy. It's just a matter of, can he buy into that?
Excellent stuff. Last thing I've really got is what's cooking in the portal. I know everyone knows about like the major 3 guys that, Stogner, the kid from Notre Dame, D lineman, and then obviously McCullough from Indiana. What else you seeing out there? What's cooking?
Well, Teddy, once I'm done, I think I want to just have you talk about McCullough for a while, because I think you might be the only person more excited about him than I am. I think that's I
can't wait. Man. He's a stud, man.
Yeah, he's a monster. I saw him back during COVID. I saw him at a camp in southern Oklahoma. He was in Idabel, Oklahoma, of all places on earth. And yeah, it was like the only camp in the country that was happening. So guys came in from all over, and he and Day were both there. And you were just like, I don't know what you're going to be yet, but you're a freak. Like, I want you as part of whatever roster I'm involved with. So, but yeah, as far as the portal, they had a couple of guys in this weekend. Trey Harris was in, a big receiver from La Tech that I think is really one of their focuses early on here in the portal. I've been told they're about as high on him as any receiver in the portal right now. So that's a guy they really like. And you bring him in this weekend, I think that's a really good indicator because he can't go anywhere else. He's not going to be able to take any more visits for a couple of weeks. OU kind of has that last thought in his head. And if he's planning to enroll at semester, which I'm almost certain he is, then he's got to make, you got to start planning for moves. You got to get all that in place. You would think that's a pretty good indicator of where he's at. The other guy that came in is a guy I know you two are familiar with, Caden Prather from West Virginia came in. So big, long, athletic guy, a lot there to like. Kind of faded in and out from games at times with West Virginia, but there's a lot of skill there to like, and a guy that knows Jalil Farouk, goes back. He's one of those DMV guys. And I think those two could be guys they land, and then you kind of see where it goes. I kind of keep waiting for an offensive lineman to come in. The Jeremiah Byers kid I like a lot. And the recent offer, who I'm going to forget, the kid from Tulsa, he's from Austin. Of course, I can just go blank on his name right at this moment. But, I feel like it's been a little more controlled. There's a more clear idea of what they're trying to get out of the portal as to where last year, you guys know, they had to fill that roster. It just wasn't where it needed to be. And I think with this recruiting class, and as well as it looks like they're going to close, they don't have the same amount of holes, so they can focus more heavily on 8 to 12 guys rather than we got to recruit 30 guys and hope we get 15 and they're the right 15. So that is, I think it's going very well for them. Like I said, you get McCullough, you get an experienced guy on the inside like Jacob Lacey that you mentioned. And then, you throw in Austin Stogner just to give that tight end room just some stability, some experience. It feels like they're filling holes, but they're doing it in the right way, where you're getting guys that address your needs rather than just this is a guy who can play the position at practice.
Yeah. And don't worry, I'll make sure and send a formal apology to Dylan Wade's family for you for forgetting his name.
I was like, it's Wade or Where. That happens.
There's way too much going on, man. You're fine. You're absolutely fine. Josh, you're the man. You guys do a great job over there at Sooner Scoop, staying on top of all this, man. It's must view stuff for any OU fan. Go subscribe, people, Soonerscoop.com.
Appreciate it, guys.